The moment my daughter-in-law Melissa threw my handmade gift to the floor and called it cheap trash just like you, I knew everything was about to change. But let me take you back to where it all began, because this story isn't just about one moment of cruelty. It's about years of silent suffering that led to the most satisfying revenge of my life. My name is Patricia Howard. I'm 63 years old, and I've called Hartford, Connecticut home for the past 4 decades. For 35 years, I worked as a senior accountant at Hartford Insurance Group, saving every penny I could for my family's future. I raised my son Michael as a single mother after my husband died in a car accident when Michael was only 12. Those were the hardest years of my life, working double shifts, going without new clothes for years, and sometimes eating nothing but crackers for dinner so Michael could have proper meals. But I did it all with love, because that's what mothers do. We sacrifice, we endure, we pour our hearts into creating a better life for our children, even when they grow up and forget the price we paid. Michael is now 36, a successful attorney at a prestigious law firm in downtown Hartford. He married Melissa 5 years ago, a beautiful blonde real estate agent who comes from money and has never known what it means to struggle. From the moment I met her, I could see the disdain in her eyes when she looked at my modest 2-bedroom house, my 10-year-old Honda Civic, and my wardrobe of practical clothes from discount stores. But I bit my tongue. I smiled. I welcomed her into our family because I wanted Michael to be happy. Even when she made snide comments about my quaint little lifestyle, even when she rolled her eyes at my homemade gifts, even when she deliberately planned family gatherings when she knew I couldn't afford to contribute expensive dishes or presents. The breaking point came on my grandson Tommy's 8th birthday. Tommy is the light of my life, a sweet, curious boy who loves dinosaurs and still hugs me tight whenever I visit. For weeks, I had been working on a special gift for him, a hand-knitted dinosaur costume complete with a detailed tail, spikes along the back, and a hood shaped like a triceratops head. It took me over 60 hours to complete, using techniques my own grandmother taught me 50 years ago. I had spent $150 on the highest quality yarn I could afford, money I scraped together by skipping meals and walking to the grocery store instead of driving to save gas money. Every stitch was woven with love, every detail crafted with the care that only a grandmother's hands can provide. When I arrived at their sprawling colonial house in West Hartford's most exclusive neighborhood, carrying my carefully wrapped gift, I could already sense the tension in the air. Melissa was hosting what she called a themed birthday extravaganza, complete with a $500 dinosaur cake, professional decorations that must have cost thousands, and a pile of expensive toys that would make any child's eyes sparkle. But what happened next would change everything forever. Before I continue with this incredible story, I want you to know that what you're about to hear is completely true, and it gets even more shocking. If you're enjoying this story so far, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more real-life family drama stories. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened when I handed Tommy his gift. The party was in full swing when I walked into their backyard. 20 children ran around screaming with joy, their parents chatting over champagne and catered appetizers that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Melissa had hired a professional entertainer dressed as a dinosaur, and the whole scene looked like something out of a magazine. I found Tommy by the gift table, his eyes wide with excitement as he looked at the mountain of perfectly wrapped presents with elaborate bows and gift bags from expensive toy stores. When he saw me approaching with my modestly wrapped package, his face lit up with that pure, innocent smile that always melted my heart. "Grandma Patricia, you came," he shouted, running to hug me with chocolate cake already smeared on his cheek. "Of course I came, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss your special day for anything," I said, holding him tight and breathing in that sweet scent that only children possess. "I made something very special just for you." As I handed him the gift, I noticed several other parents watching with polite smiles. Michael was across the yard, talking to his law partners, completely oblivious to what was about to unfold. That's when Melissa appeared, as if materializing from thin air, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a glass of wine that probably cost more than my electric bill. "What's this?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she eyed my package. The wrapping paper was from the dollar store, colorful dinosaurs on a bright blue background that I thought Tommy would love. "I made Tommy a dinosaur costume," I said proudly, watching as my grandson began to carefully peel away the tape. "It took me 2 months to finish, and I think he's going to—" Before I could finish my sentence, before Tommy could even see what was inside, Melissa snatched the package from his small hands. The movement was so sudden, so aggressive, that several nearby parents turned to look. "Let me see this," she said, her voice now carrying an edge that made my stomach clench. She ripped away the remaining paper with unnecessary force, revealing the beautiful green costume I had poured my heart into creating. For a moment, time seemed frozen. I watched her face as she examined my work. The intricate stitching, the carefully shaped spikes, the lovingly crafted details that had taken me hours to perfect. I expected to see appreciation, maybe even surprise at the quality of my handiwork. Instead, her expression twisted into something ugly, something cruel. "Are you serious right now?" she said loudly enough for half the party to hear. "You brought this cheap trash to my son's birthday party?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Around us, conversations began to die as people turned to witness the unfolding drama. Tommy looked confused, his little hands reaching for his gift, not understanding why his mother was holding it like something contaminated. "Melissa, please," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "I spent months making this pathetic excuse for a gift," she interrupted, holding the costume up for everyone to see. "Look at this thing. It looks like something from a thrift store reject bin. Did you seriously think I would let my son wear this embarrassment?" My cheeks burned with shame as I felt every eye in the yard focused on us. Some parents looked away uncomfortably, while others watched with the morbid fascination of people witnessing a car accident. Then, in one swift, devastating motion, Melissa threw my beautiful handmade costume to the ground. It landed in a heap on the grass, the carefully shaped hood crumpling, one of the spikes catching on a sprinkler head. "Cheap trash, just like you," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent yard like a slap across my face. The humiliation was complete, total, devastating. I felt tears threatening to spill down my cheeks as I looked at my destroyed gift lying on the ground, at Tommy's confused and hurt expression, at the faces of strangers who had just witnessed my daughter-in-law's cruelty. But in that moment of complete humiliation, something inside me shifted. The grief, the hurt, the years of swallowed pride suddenly crystallized into something else entirely, something powerful, something dangerous. I took a deep breath, bent down to pick up my purse, and walked slowly toward Melissa. She stood there with a smug smile on her face, clearly enjoying her moment of dominance. When I reached her, I leaned in close to her ear and whispered words that would change everything. "You're going to regret this." What Melissa didn't know, what nobody in that backyard knew, was that beneath my humble exterior lay secrets that could destroy lives. You see, when you work for 35 years as a senior accountant at one of Connecticut's largest insurance companies, you learn things, you see things, you develop connections that most people could never imagine. But more importantly, you learn how to be patient, how to plan, how to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. As I walked away from that humiliating scene, my mind was already calculating. Melissa thought she had won, that she had successfully put the poor old grandmother in her place. She had no idea that she had just declared war on someone who had been quietly collecting ammunition for years. I didn't say goodbye to Michael. He was still oblivious to what had happened, laughing with his colleagues near the pool. I didn't try to comfort Tommy, though it broke my heart to see his confused little face as I walked past the gift table. Instead, I simply got in my Honda Civic and drove home, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and anticipation. The 20-minute drive to my house gave me time to think, to plan, to remember. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. You see, there was something about Melissa that had always bothered me, something beyond her obvious disdain for my financial situation. It was the way she flaunted her wealth, the way she talked about her investment properties and her business deals with such casual confidence. For someone who sold maybe 3 houses a month, she seemed to have an awful lot of expensive toys. So, about a year ago, I had done what any concerned grandmother would do. I started paying attention. When you've spent decades analyzing financial documents and spotting irregularities, certain patterns become impossible to ignore. like how Melissa always seemed to have cash when she needed it, like how she owned 4 investment properties on a real estate agent's commission, like how she drove a brand new Mercedes while claiming to be building her portfolio. I had kept my suspicions to myself, filed away in the back of my mind like insurance claims waiting for review. But after today's humiliation, it was time to pull those files. Once inside my modest living room, I went straight to my computer and began making phone calls. The first was to my former colleague Janet, who now worked in the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services. The second was to my neighbor's son, who happened to be an investigative journalist for the Hartford Courant. The third was to a contact I had cultivated over the years at the Connecticut Real Estate Commission. "Hi, Janet. It's Patricia Howard," I said when she picked up. "Remember how you always said if I ever needed a favor to just call? Well, I need you to run some tax records for me." Within an hour, I had confirmation of what I had suspected for months. Melissa hadn't filed proper tax returns on her rental income from 3 of her 4 properties. We're talking about $45,000 in unreported income over the past 2 years. But that was just the beginning. The real goldmine came when my journalist contact called back with information about a property flipping scheme that several Connecticut real estate agents were allegedly involved in. Guess whose name appeared on the list of agents under investigation? But the piece de resistance came from my contact at the Real Estate Commission. It turns out that Melissa had been operating without a proper license for the past 6 months. Her certification had expired, and she had somehow failed to renew it while continuing to conduct sales and earn commissions. That meant every transaction she had completed in the past half year was illegal. Every commission she had earned was obtained through fraud. Every contract she had signed was invalid. I sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time since leaving that birthday party. Melissa thought she could humiliate me, throw my love back in my face, and call me trash in front of strangers? She was about to learn that this 63-year-old grandmother had claws. Knowledge is power, but timing is everything. I could have picked up the phone immediately and reported Melissa to every relevant authority, but that would have been too quick, too simple. After the humiliation she had put me through, she deserved something more, memorable. Over the next week, I meticulously planned my approach. I documented every detail of Melissa's illegal activities, created a timeline of her unlicensed real estate transactions, and calculated the exact amount of money involved in her tax evasion. The numbers were staggering. $78,000 in unreported income, $23,000 in illegal commissions, and potential penalties and interest that could reach $150,000. But I wanted to do more than just report her. I wanted her to understand exactly what she had done to herself. The opportunity came the following Saturday when Michael called to invite me to dinner. "Mom, Melissa feels terrible about what happened at the party," he lied smoothly. I could hear her coaching him in the background, probably worried that word of her behavior might spread to the wrong people. "She wants to make it up to you. We're having a small dinner party tonight, just a few close friends. She'd really like you to come." I almost laughed out loud. A dinner party. How perfectly ironic. "Of course, sweetheart," I said sweetly. "I'd love to come. Should I bring anything?" No, just bring yourself. Melissa's taking care of everything." I arrived at their house at precisely 7 o'clock, carrying a small gift bag containing a bottle of wine I had purchased for the occasion. Nothing expensive. I wanted to maintain my image as the humble grandmother who couldn't afford anything fancy. The other guests were exactly who I expected. 3 couples from their social circle, all wealthy professionals who lived in the same exclusive neighborhood. The kind of people who would be very interested to learn about certain illegal activities happening right under their noses. Melissa greeted me at the door with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Patricia, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, air-kissing my cheek while wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Please come in. Let me introduce you to everyone." The evening progressed exactly as I anticipated. Melissa played the role of the gracious hostess, making subtle comments about her real estate success while carefully avoiding any mention of the birthday party incident. She talked about her latest investment property acquisition and her expanding client portfolio with the confidence of someone who believed she was untouchable. I played my part perfectly, the grateful grandmother so happy to be included, asking innocent questions about her business and expressing admiration for her success, all while mentally noting every lie, every exaggeration, every illegal transaction she casually mentioned. "It's amazing how well you're doing in real estate," I said during dinner, cutting into the $80 steak she had ordered from Hartford's most expensive steakhouse. You must work so hard to manage all those properties and clients. Well, it's all about building relationships, she replied smugly, refilling her wine glass. When you have the right connections and know how to work the system, success just follows naturally. If only she knew how prophetic those words were. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I made my move. "Melissa, dear," I said, as she walked me to the door. "Could we have a quick private chat? I wanted to apologize again for the misunderstanding at Tommy's party." Her face immediately brightened. Clearly, she thought I was about to grovel for her forgiveness. "Of course, Patricia. I'm glad you brought it up. I think we both said things we didn't mean." I waited until the last guest had left and Michael had gone upstairs to check on Tommy before I turned to face her in the grand foyer of her $1,000,000 home. "Actually, Melissa," I said, pulling out my phone, "there's something I need to show you." The look on Melissa's face when I showed her the first document was something I'll treasure for the rest of my life. It was the exact moment when her smug confidence crumbled and raw fear took its place. What is this?" she stammered, staring at the tax document on my phone screen that clearly showed her unreported rental income from 2023. "It's a very interesting piece of information I received from a friend at the Department of Revenue Services," I said calmly, scrolling to the next document. "And this is your real estate commission records for the past 6 months, the period when your license was expired." Her face went completely white. "How did you can't. This is illegal. You can't just—" "Actually, dear," I interrupted, enjoying every moment of her panic. "All of this information is available to anyone who knows where to look and has the right connections. The same connections you boasted about having just an hour ago." I scrolled to another document. "This one is my favorite. It's a list of all the properties you've sold in the past 6 months without a valid license. Do you know what the penalties are for practicing real estate without proper certification in Connecticut?" She was breathing heavily now, her perfectly applied makeup beginning to show stress lines around her eyes. "Patricia, please, I can explain all of this. There were some administrative delays with my license renewal and the rental income. I was planning to file amended returns." "Oh, I'm sure you were," I said sweetly. "Just like you were planning to apologize to your grandmother-in-law for humiliating her at her grandson's birthday party. That's not— I was having a stressful day and—" "No excuses, Melissa." My voice grew harder. "You called me trash. You threw away a gift that represented months of work and love. You humiliated me in front of strangers and broke your son's heart in the process." Tears were forming in her eyes now. Not tears of remorse, but tears of fear. Fear of losing everything she had built on lies and illegal activities. "What do you want?" she whispered. I smiled and put my phone back in my purse. "I want you to understand something very important, dear. You see, for 35 years, I balanced books, analyzed financial records, and caught people who thought they were smarter than the system. I've seen countless individuals who believed they could cut corners and break rules without consequences." I stepped closer to her, close enough to see the mascara starting to run down her cheeks. "You made a critical error when you decided to humiliate me. You assumed I was just a harmless old woman with no power, no connections, no ability to fight back. You forgot that respect is earned, not demanded, and that underestimating people based on their appearance is always a mistake." "Please," she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a family. Tommy needs me. I can't go to prison." "Prison?" I raised an eyebrow. "Who said anything about prison? Although, given the amount of money involved in your tax evasion scheme, we're talking about $78,000 in unreported income over 2 years, and the multiple felony charges for practicing without a license. Well, let's just say you'd be looking at significant jail time if someone were to report all of this to the proper authorities." She collapsed into a chair, her head in her hands. "What do you want from me? I want you to walk back into that living room where my son is probably wondering what's taking so long. I want you to call him downstairs and tell him exactly what you said to me at Tommy's birthday party. Word for word." "I can't do that. You'll lose him?" I finished. "Yes, you probably will. But that's the consequence of your actions, not mine. You made the choice to be cruel. Now you get to live with the results. And if I do this, if I tell Michael everything, you'll keep quiet about the other stuff?" I paused, pretending to consider her offer. "That depends entirely on how sincere your apology is and how committed you are to changing your behavior going forward, both toward me and toward getting your legal affairs in order." She looked up at me with desperation in her eyes. "You're going to destroy my marriage." "No, dear," I corrected gently. "You destroyed your marriage the moment you decided to treat your husband's mother like garbage. I'm just making sure he knows what kind of person he's really married to." Watching Melissa summon Michael downstairs was like watching a condemned person walk to the gallows. Her hands shook as she called his name, her voice barely steady enough to form words. "Michael, honey, could you come down here for a minute? There's something I need to tell you." My son appeared at the top of the staircase, still in his casual Saturday evening clothes, completely oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in his absence. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "Please, just come sit down," Melissa said, gesturing toward the living room. Her voice was thick with barely contained tears. I remained in the foyer, watching as this woman who had humiliated me just 1 week ago prepared to face the consequences of her cruelty. Part of me felt almost sorry for her. Almost. Michael settled onto their expensive leather sofa, his expression growing concerned as he noticed his wife's distressed state and the tension in the air. "Melissa, you're scaring me." "What's wrong?" She looked at me standing in the doorway, her eyes pleading for mercy. I simply nodded toward Michael, reminding her of our agreement. "At Tommy's birthday party last week," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "When your mother brought her gift." "What about it?" Michael asked, glancing between us with growing confusion. I did something terrible." The words came out in a rush, like she was afraid that if she didn't say them quickly, she'd lose her nerve entirely. "When she gave Tommy the dinosaur costume she made, I took it away from him and threw it on the ground." Michael's face went blank. "You what?" "I threw away her gift and I called it cheap trash." She was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. "And I called her cheap trash too." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning horror as he processed what his wife had just confessed. "You called my mother trash?" His voice was deadly quiet. "Michael, I was stressed about the party, and there were so many people there, and—" "You humiliated my mother at our son's birthday party?" He stood up abruptly, his face reddening with anger I rarely saw from my typically calm, professional son. "I know it was wrong, but nothing!" Michael exploded. "Do you have any idea what my mother sacrificed for me? Do you know she worked 2 jobs to put me through law school? That she went without so I could have everything I needed?" Melissa flinched at his tone. I know, and I'm sorry." "You're sorry?" Michael turned to look at me, his eyes filled with shame and fury. "Mom, is this true? She really said that to you?" I nodded quietly. "She did, sweetheart, in front of everyone. And you didn't tell me?" His voice cracked with pain. "You just went home and said nothing?" "What was I supposed to say, Michael? That your wife thinks I'm trash? That she destroyed a gift I spent 2 months making for my grandson? I didn't want to cause problems in your marriage." Michael ran his hands through his hair, pacing around the room like a caged animal. 2 months? You spent 2 months making Tommy's costume?" "Every evening after work," I confirmed. "I wanted it to be perfect for him." He whirled around to face Melissa, his expression thunderous. "You destroyed something my mother spent 2 months making for our son? You threw it on the ground and called her trash?" "Michael, please, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain how you could be so cruel to the woman who raised me? Explain how you could humiliate her in public? Explain how you could break our son's heart by destroying his grandmother's gift?" I was having a bad day, and— "A bad day?" Michael's voice rose to a shout. "You think having a bad day justifies treating my mother like garbage?" I had never seen my son so angry. In all his 36 years, through all the challenges we had faced together, I had never witnessed this level of fury from him. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected: satisfaction. Not just because Melissa was finally facing consequences, but because my son, my wonderful boy, who I had raised to be a good man, was defending me with the fierce loyalty I had always hoped for. "Mom," he said, turning to me with tears in his eyes, "I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry that this happened to you, and that you felt you couldn't tell me about it. It's not your fault, sweetheart. It is my fault. I should have seen what kind of person I married. I should have protected you." He looked back at Melissa with disgust. How could I not know that my wife was capable of this kind of cruelty? And in that moment, I realized that my revenge was complete. Not because Melissa was crying, not because she was afraid of the legal consequences of her other activities, but because my son finally saw her for who she really was. The days following Melissa's confession were like watching a carefully constructed house of cards collapse in slow motion. Michael moved into the guest bedroom that very night, and by Monday morning he had contacted a divorce attorney. But the personal drama was only the beginning of Melissa's problems. You see, I had kept my promise. I hadn't immediately reported her illegal activities to the authorities, but I also hadn't promised to keep them secret forever. And when Michael learned about his wife's tax evasion and unlicensed real estate activities during their inevitable discussions about asset division, well, let's just say he took his civic duties as an attorney very seriously. "Mom, I need to ask you something," he said when he came to visit me on Wednesday evening, looking exhausted and heartbroken. "When you showed Melissa those documents on Saturday night, where exactly did that information come from?" I poured him a cup of coffee in my small kitchen, the same one where I had fed him countless meals as a child. "I have friends who work in various government offices, sweetheart. When someone's behavior doesn't add up, it's not hard to verify suspicions if you know the right people to ask." He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. "How long have you suspected she was involved in illegal activities?" "About a year," I admitted. "Something about her finances never made sense. Real estate agents don't typically own 4 investment properties and drive luxury cars unless they're extremely successful or they're cutting corners somewhere." "And you never said anything?" "What was I supposed to say? Michael, I think your wife is a criminal? You were happy, or at least I thought you were. I wasn't going to destroy your marriage based on suspicions, but you would destroy it based on how she treated you." I looked at my son, this man I had raised to be honest, hardworking and kind, and chose my words carefully. "I didn't destroy anything, Michael. I simply made sure she faced the consequences of her own actions, both the way she treated me and the illegal activities she chose to engage in." He nodded slowly. "I have to report this to the authorities, you know. As an attorney, I can't ignore evidence of tax fraud and unlicensed professional activity." "I know, sweetheart. I wouldn't expect you to do anything else." The next morning, Michael filed formal complaints with the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services, the Connecticut Real Estate Commission, and the state attorney's office. By Friday, Melissa had received official notices of investigation from all 3 agencies. But the real devastation came when word of the investigations spread through her professional network. The Connecticut real estate community is smaller than most people realize, and news of an agent practicing without a license while evading taxes travels fast. By the end of the week, Melissa had lost 3 major clients and 2 property listings. Her mentor at the real estate agency where she worked called an emergency meeting on Monday morning. I know this because Michael's divorce attorney had subpoenaed all of Melissa's employment records, and the termination letter was quite detailed. "Due to allegations of unlicensed practice and tax evasion, currently under investigation by state authorities," the letter read, "we have no choice but to terminate your association with our agency effective immediately. Your actions have brought potential liability to our firm and damaged our reputation in the community." The financial consequences were swift and brutal. Without her real estate income, Melissa couldn't make the payments on her Mercedes. Without her illegal rental income, she couldn't afford the mortgages on her investment properties. Her carefully constructed lifestyle of luxury and excess began crumbling faster than she could manage the damage. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when she had to appear before the Connecticut Real Estate Commission to answer for practicing without a license. I know about this because it's a matter of public record, and because my journalist friend at the Hartford Courant decided to write a story about unlicensed real estate agents operating in the state. "Local real estate agent faces multiple investigations," the headline read. The article detailed how Melissa had conducted $340,000 worth of property sales while her license was expired, earning $1,700 in illegal commissions. It also mentioned the ongoing tax evasion investigation and the potential criminal charges she might face. The shame was complete and public. Every person who had attended Tommy's birthday party, every neighbor in her exclusive development, every professional contact she had cultivated over the years could now read about her illegal activities in the newspaper. Michael called me that evening after the article was published. "Mom, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not seeing who she really was sooner. For letting her treat you badly. for being so blind to what was happening in my own home. You were in love, sweetheart. Love makes us see what we want to see. But you saw through her from the beginning, didn't you? I thought about that for a moment. I saw someone who had never struggled, never sacrificed, never learned the value of treating people with respect, regardless of their circumstances. But I hoped she would grow into being worthy of you and Tommy. And now? Now she's learning that actions have consequences. Whether she grows from this experience or not is up to her. 3 weeks after Melissa's world began unraveling, I received an unexpected phone call that would bring this entire saga to its most satisfying conclusion. The number on my caller ID was one I recognized, my former colleague Janet from the Department of Revenue Services. "Patricia, I have some interesting news about that tax case you helped us identify," she said, her voice carrying the excitement of someone who had uncovered something significant. "When we started digging into Melissa Howard's finances, we found something much bigger than simple, underreported rental income." I sat down in my favorite armchair, the one where I had spent countless evenings knitting Tommy's dinosaur costume. "How much bigger?" "We're talking about a sophisticated money laundering operation involving at least 6 other real estate agents and over $2.3 million in illegal transactions over the past 3 years. Your daughter-in-law wasn't just evading taxes on rental income. She was helping other people hide money through fake property sales." The magnitude of what Janet was telling me sent chills down my spine. When I had first started investigating Melissa's finances, I thought I was simply dealing with a selfish woman who was cutting corners on her taxes. I never imagined I had stumbled onto something this serious. "Are you saying she's part of a criminal enterprise?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. The FBI is taking over the case from the state authorities. We're looking at federal charges for money laundering, conspiracy, fraud, and tax evasion. If convicted, she could be looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison." After I hung up with Janet, I sat in my living room for a long time, processing what I had just learned. In seeking justice for my own humiliation, I had accidentally uncovered a major criminal operation. The woman who had called me trash was about to face the full weight of federal criminal charges. 2 days later, the FBI raided Melissa's house at 6 in the morning. Michael had moved out weeks earlier and was staying in a hotel while apartment hunting, so only Melissa and Tommy were home. My heart broke thinking about my grandson witnessing his mother being arrested. But the authorities had no choice once they discovered the scope of her criminal activities. Michael called me an hour after the raid, his voice shaking with shock and disbelief. "Mom, they arrested her. The FBI arrested Melissa for money laundering." "I know, sweetheart. I heard." "How could I have been married to someone involved in organized crime? How could I have been so blind?" "Because she was very good at hiding who she really was," I said gently, "and because you're a good person who assumes other people are good too." "What am I going to tell Tommy? How do I explain that his mother is a criminal?" It was a question no parent should ever have to ask, and my heart ached for both my son and my grandson. "You tell him the truth, in age-appropriate ways. You make sure he knows that his mother's choices don't reflect on him, and that he's still loved and safe." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and family crisis management. The Hartford Courant ran a front-page story about the money laundering ring with Melissa's arrest photo prominently displayed. The headline read, "West Hartford Mother Charged in $2.3 million Money Laundering Scheme." The article detailed how the criminal enterprise worked. Wealthy individuals who wanted to hide money from taxes or divorce proceedings would purchase properties from the conspirators at inflated prices. The conspirators would then sell the properties back at lower prices, creating the appearance of legitimate real estate losses, while the hidden money was funneled through offshore accounts. Melissa's role had been to facilitate these fake transactions using her real estate credentials and connections. For each transaction, she received a fee of $5,000 to $15,000. Over 3 years, she had earned approximately $180,000 from the scheme, money she had used to fund her luxury lifestyle and purchase her investment properties. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came when investigators uncovered that Melissa had been planning to recruit Michael into the operation. They found emails on her computer discussing how his law firm's reputation and connections could help them expand their money laundering activities to include wealthy corporate clients. When Michael learned about this, he was devastated. Not only had his wife been living a criminal double life, but she had been planning to destroy his career and reputation by making him an unwitting accomplice to her crimes. She was going to use me, he said, when he came to my house the evening after the news broke. She was going to turn me into a criminal without me even knowing it. But she didn't, I reminded him. Her own arrogance and cruelty brought everything crashing down before she could drag you into it. Because you stopped her. I looked at my son, this good man who had been unknowingly married to a criminal, and realized that what had started as revenge for a personal humiliation had actually saved his entire future. Sometimes, I said quietly, the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes. If Melissa hadn't humiliated me at Tommy's party, I never would have investigated her finances, and you might have ended up in federal prison alongside her. 6 months after that fateful birthday party, I found myself sitting in a federal courthouse watching Melissa Howard face the consequences of her crimes. The woman who had once thrown my handmade gift to the ground and called me trash now stood before a federal judge in an orange jumpsuit, her hands shackled, her blonde hair pulled back in a prison regulation style. The transformation was complete and devastating. The prosecution had presented a compelling case. Over 3 days of testimony, federal agents detailed how Melissa had been a key player in a money laundering operation that had processed $2.3 million in illegal transactions. They showed emails where she had boasted about her bulletproof system for hiding money. They presented bank records showing the $180,000 she had earned from the scheme. They even played recorded phone conversations where she had discussed recruiting other real estate agents into the operation. But perhaps most damaging was her own arrogance on display throughout the proceedings. Even facing decades in federal prison, Melissa maintained an attitude of superiority and entitlement. When questioned about the fake property sales, she insisted she had been providing a valuable service to clients with complex financial needs. When confronted with evidence of her tax evasion, she claimed it was standard practice in the industry. Her defense attorney had clearly advised her to show remorse, but Melissa seemed incapable of genuine contrition. Even her apology to the court sounded rehearsed and hollow. Your Honor, I realize now that my actions were wrong, and I accept full responsibility for my poor judgment. Poor judgment. As if facilitating money laundering was equivalent to parking in the wrong spot. When it came time for sentencing, the federal prosecutor requested the maximum penalty. This defendant showed a pattern of criminal behavior spanning multiple years, he argued. She used her professional credentials to facilitate serious crimes. She recruited others into criminal activity, and she has shown no genuine remorse for her actions. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who reminded me of myself, listened carefully to all the arguments before delivering her verdict. Ms. Howard, you have been convicted of conspiracy to commit money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. These are serious crimes that undermine the integrity of our financial system and deprive law-abiding citizens of tax revenue that supports vital public services. She paused, looking directly at Melissa with obvious disdain. What makes your case particularly troubling is the sophistication of your criminal operation and your complete lack of genuine remorse. You used your position as a licensed professional to facilitate serious crimes, and even now you seem to view yourself as a victim rather than taking true responsibility for your actions. The courtroom was silent as the judge continued. Therefore, I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay $3 million in restitution to the victims of your crimes, plus $340,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest to the Internal Revenue Service. 12 years. Melissa would be 46 years old when she was released from prison, assuming she served her full sentence. Tommy would be 20, a grown man who had spent his formative years with his father and grandmother while his mother paid for her crimes. As the bailiff led Melissa away in shackles, she turned back toward the gallery where Michael and I were sitting. For just a moment, her mask of arrogance slipped, and I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She was finally understanding that this was real, that her comfortable life was over, that she would spend the next 12 years in a federal penitentiary. Outside the courthouse, Michael was approached by several reporters wanting his reaction to his ex-wife's sentencing. He declined to comment, but I could see the relief in his posture. The nightmare was finally over. How do you feel? I asked him as we walked to his car. Sad for Tommy, he he said honestly, but also grateful. Grateful that you uncovered all of this before she could destroy more lives. Grateful that I found out who she really was before it was too late for me. And what about the humiliation at the birthday party? Do you think the punishment fits the crime? Michael stopped walking and turned to face me. Mom, what she did to you at that party wasn't the crime. It was just the catalyst that revealed her true character. The crime was 3 years of money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. The crime was planning to recruit me into her criminal enterprise. The crime was building a life based on lies and stolen money. He was right, of course. My humiliation had been personal, but Melissa's crimes had affected dozens of people and defrauded the government of millions in tax revenue. Besides, Michael added with a slight smile, I've learned never to underestimate my mother. Anyone who calls you trash clearly doesn't understand who they're dealing with. 1 year after Melissa's sentencing, I was back in Michael's backyard, not the mansion in West Hartford, which had been seized by the federal government to pay toward her restitution, but the modest 3-bedroom house he had purchased in a middle-class neighborhood where Tommy could attend good schools and make friends without the pressure of excessive wealth. It was Tommy's 9th birthday, and this party was everything the previous year's celebration wasn't. Instead of 20 children and catered food, there were 6 of Tommy's closest friends and homemade decorations. Instead of expensive gifts and hired entertainment, there were games in the backyard and a cake Michael had baked himself. And instead of humiliation and cruelty, there was love, laughter, and genuine joy. Grandma Patricia, will you help me put on my costume? Tommy asked, running up to me with excitement shining in his eyes. In his hands was a carefully reconstructed version of the dinosaur costume I had made him the year before. Michael had hired a professional seamstress to recreate it from pictures after the original was destroyed. Of course, sweetheart, I said, kneeling down to help him into the green fabric that had started this entire journey. As I adjusted the hood and straightened the spikes along his back, I marveled at how much had changed in 12 months. Michael was happier than I had seen him in years. Without the stress of Melissa's demanding lifestyle and illegal activities, he had been able to focus on what truly mattered, being a good father and rebuilding his relationship with his son. He had even started dating again, a kind elementary school teacher named Sarah who treated both Michael and Tommy with genuine affection. Tommy, despite the trauma of his mother's arrest and imprisonment, was thriving. He was getting regular counseling to help him process his feelings about his mother's situation, and Michael was doing an excellent job of maintaining honesty without burdening his son with inappropriate details. Dad says Mommy made some very bad choices and has to stay in a special place for a long time to think about what she did, Tommy had told me a few months earlier. But he says it's not my fault and I'm still a good boy. That's exactly right, I had assured him. And you know what? Sometimes when adults make bad choices, it helps us appreciate the people in our lives who make good choices even more. As the party continued and I watched my grandson play with his friends, wearing the costume that had inadvertently brought down a criminal enterprise, I reflected on the incredible chain of events that had started with such a painful moment. If someone had told me a year ago that having my gift thrown to the ground would ultimately lead to uncovering a $2.3 million money laundering scheme, I never would have believed them. If they had told me that the woman who called me trash would end up in federal prison while I would be surrounded by family who truly loved and respected me, I would have thought they were crazy. But sometimes life has a way of correcting imbalances in the most unexpected ways. Mom, Michael said, sitting down beside me as we watched the children play, I never properly thanked you for what you did. You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. I was just protecting my family. No, it was more than that. You could have let Melissa's behavior slide, the way you had been doing for years. You could have kept your suspicions about her finances to yourself. But instead, you stood up for yourself, and in doing so, saved all of us from so much worse. I thought about his words as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the modest backyard. You know what I learned through all of this? What's that? That respect and dignity aren't determined by how much money you have or what kind of house you live in. They're determined by how you treat people, especially people who can't fight back or don't have power over you. Melissa learned that lesson the hard way. Yes, she did. 12 years is a long time to think about the consequences of treating people with cruelty and contempt. As the party wound down and families began to leave, Tommy ran over to give me a big hug, still wearing his dinosaur costume. Grandma Patricia, this was the best birthday party ever, he said, squeezing me tight. Thank you for making my costume again. You're welcome, sweetheart. I love you very much. I love you too. And Grandma? Yes? You're not trash. You're the best grandma in the whole world. Out of the mouths of babes. As I drove home that evening, I thought about how this story had started with such pain and humiliation, but had ended with justice, healing, and stronger family bonds. Sometimes, the worst moments in our lives become the catalysts for the best changes we could never have imagined. Melissa Howard had called me cheap trash and thrown away my gift. But in doing so, she had thrown away her freedom, her marriage, her son, and her future. Meanwhile, I was driving home from a beautiful birthday party, surrounded by family who loved me, with the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. If that's not a perfect example of karma, I don't know what is. And to everyone watching this story unfold, remember this: never underestimate someone based on their appearance or circumstances. You never know who might have the power to change your life forever, for better or worse. Before I go, I want to thank all of you for following this incredible journey with me. If you enjoyed hearing about how justice was finally served, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more real-life family drama stories. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your support means the world to me, and I look forward to sharing more stories with you soon. Sometimes the sweetest victories come from the most bitter beginnings, and sometimes standing up for yourself changes everything. Thank you for watching, and remember, treat people with kindness and respect, because you never know who might be watching and taking notes.